America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future. Those were the words of Frederick Douglass, former slave turned national leader for the abolition of slavery, whose opinion, President Abraham Lincoln said, was the most important in the nation. A month before the end of the Civil War, Lincoln called for the Union to honor Black Americans with the right to vote, and 3 days later he was shot and killed by the Confederate terrorist John Wilkes Booth. Now, Lincoln had picked a Southerner, Andrew Johnson, as his vice president in the hopes of unifying a divided country. When Johnson took over the presidency, he was supposed to oversee the prosecutions of 39 Confederate leaders responsible for the bloodiest war in U.S. history that the South thought was a righteous rebellion to protect slavery. Judge John C. Underwood presided over the case, and he was furious that Confederate leaders, with hands dripping with the blood of our slaughtered innocents and martyred president, were still at large. Judge Underwood's court issued a warning. Failure to convict would embolden future rebellions and more acts of treason. He spoke to the jury directly, and he said, "It's for you to teach them that those who sow the wind must reap the whirlwind, that clemency and mercy to them would be cruelty and murder to the innocent and unborn." Confederate General Robert E. Lee and the Southern Shadow President, Jefferson Davis, faced capital punishment if they were to be found guilty. The charge was being moved and seduced by the instigation of the devil to subvert and to stir, move and incite insurrection, rebellion, and war against the United States of America. But there were countless delays. President Johnson was protesting against including black jurists, and 1 month before the end of his term, Johnson just drops all the charges. Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis and 37 other Confederate leaders just walk away. In fact, the only American found guilty of treason during the Civil War was John Brown, an abolitionist who fought to end slavery. And for that, Brown was hanged for the crime of treason against Virginia. And witnesses to his hanging were none other than General Robert E. Lee and John Wilkes Booth. For General Lee and the Confederates, there'd be no convictions. And what happened next? Northern U.S. congressmen don't want to seat Confederates or their sympathizers in Congress. They want a Union military presence in the southern states to maintain law and order, and they want to pass protections for Black America. But President Johnson vetoes those protections and fires one of his so-called radical cabinet members who agrees with them. And as a result, Johnson is the first president to be impeached, but he escapes conviction in the Senate. And so Reconstruction and reconciliation are compromised and crippled. Statues of Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis are built to commemorate white supremacy and treason, and myths around states' rights and Southern pride live on as a transparent cover for the shame of an ideology of extreme brutality and delusional supremacy. And that culture of the Confederacy rises again and again. Anti-democratic, anti-science, anti-black, anti-brown, anti-immigrant, anti-everything, and anything that isn't their clan. And century after century, so-called white moderates find unscrupulous reasons to accommodate these white supremacists for their own self-interest, for their lack of courage. And Black America, Native America, everybody else, be damned. And so now we see today, rising from the boneyards of America's unatoned sins, Marjorie Taylor Greene, a terrorist sympathizer who signaled approval for political assassinations, who disparages Jews and Muslims, who publicly harasses child survivors of school shootings, which she claims are just conspiracies to steal her guns, who Republicans elected into our Congress and Republican leadership rewarded with a position on the Education and Labor Committee. These people are not only uninterested in unity, they openly embrace political violence. This is not white privilege. It's our recurring white nightmare, haunting us century after century with their suicidal fantasy that nobody really belongs here but them. 147 Congress members committed treason when they voted to overthrow our democracy. 147 Congress members now claim with forked tongues to have only represented the hordes that welcomed their lies. No, those 147 traitors who made every effort to subvert, stir, move, and incite insurrection and rebellion against our country must be expelled from public office, tried, and convicted in a court of law. Their sponsors, enablers, and promoters must all face boycotts and cancellations and be hauled into court on charges of sedition. For the millions of descendants of African slaves and the survivors of Native American Holocaust, for every citizen of our migrant nation who believes in equality for all people, it is for you to teach them that those who sow the wind must reap the whirlwind, that clemency and mercy to them would be cruelty and murder to the innocent and unborn. In the words of Frederick Douglass, if this war is to be forgotten, I ask in the name of all things sacred, what shall men remember? We must never forget that victory to the rebellion meant death to the republic,